Let me go back. It's being weird. Okay, sorry. Ah, I see. Now let's start at the beginning. Okay, so welcome. Thank you for those who are able to join us in person, and or in live, I should say. This is this is odd. Sorry, my apologies. I think that it's going on auto, and I have to not do that because I see that was my bad. Presenter view. Okay. Yeah, I did autoplay. My apologies. I didn't intend for that to happen. So I could go through the slides. Anyhow, again, thanks for folks who are able to join us here. Looking forward to being able to share this recording afterwards on the Amato Kaya um, YouTube channel. This is the Amato Kaya Initiative, We Are Not Immigrants, Unsettling Asians in America, Environmental Justice and um, guest lecture and speaker series. We run this lecture and speaker series along with the Asian American Pacific Islander Seed Stewards based out of the Department of Asian American Studies at UC Davis. Just a quick background on the Amato Kai Initiative. It's still, I think, relatively new for some folks, but the Amato Kaya Initiative inherits some of the work we initially started with the Bulosan Center for Philippinic Studies that was in the Asian American Studies department at UC Davis until I left and took some of that work and expanded some of our scope when we founded the Amato Kaya Initiative in 2021. AKI is a BIPOC-led project that advances the commitments of late social justice activist and community organizer Amado Kaya Cana Rodriguez, my oldest son, who died at 22 in 2020 after supporting an indigenous group in the Philippines suffering from losses due to typhoons. As I'd said, the AKI inherits some of the programming we did with the Bulosan Center for Philippinic Studies, but really expands the scope of our work because we're also continuing the legacy, Amato's activist legacy, by disseminating indigenous, land-based, decolonial knowledge and promoting individual and collective healing, transformation, and liberation. So this guest lecture series, again, hosted in collaboration with the Asian American Seed Stewards at UC Davis, our lecture title it is a little provocative. I just got an email from somebody saying, how can you say that the Asians are not immigrants? We are, and yet we're also inviting Asian Americans, who are our primary audience for AKI, to really push back against the narrative of the U.S. as a nation of immigrants, and really consider the ways in which our presence in the U.S. and the immigrant narrative is very deeply complicit with white settler colonial narratives. And that's why we're saying we are not immigrants. It's an invitation for us to unsettle and not be part of a white settler colonial logic in this place that we call America, or may be also recognized and known as Turtle Island by Native peoples. The title of our lecture series is inspired both by Hawaiian sovereignty activist and professor of Hawaiian studies, Haunani K. Trask, her specific poem, Settler Not Immigrants, which is a really powerful poem that really, again, it's an invitation, a provocation for Asians. She was addressing Asians in Hawaii to really think about the ways in which they may be participating in white settler logics. And again, inviting us to consider how to push back and resist those logics. A similar kind of theme of Not a Nation of Immigrants is in the title of the book by Native American Studies scholar Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz, who again is really inviting us to really challenge this idea that, oh, the United States is this nation of immigrants, because what that does is really erase the violent, the genocide and violent dispossession of Native peoples to settle what we now know as America. So this series hosts lectures and conversations with Asian American and other scholars and activists of color who write about or are actively resisting white settler colonialism in California and beyond through work with Indigenous communities, environmental justice, and our land stewardship. It also holds space for Asian American identified folks, and that's the main audience for AKI, and the Asian American seed stewards to listen and learn from Indigenous people, to encourage us to challenge and resist our complicities with white settler colonialism as residents on Turtle Island. Our series has been running from since April and will continue through June. We may have something that might a rescheduled talk coming a little bit later this maybe even in July, we'll see, but in the main our series has been running from April through June. We do announce our speakers on Instagram, on the Amato Kaya Instagram page. We also have a newsletter, so please sign up for that to stay updated. And really, we want to invite folks to consider supporting our work through a donation so that we can continue to do this work into the future. I won't go into, I think everybody's familiar with the new funding landscape under the administration, at least when it comes to federal funds. And but it's also true that there has been a kind of chilling effect in philanthropy in terms of supporting the kinds of work that we do through the Marakai Initiative. So many attacks have been launched against ethnic studies, and particularly for the kind of liberatory ethnic studies it does. Talk very frankly about settler colonialisms, whether it's here in North America or in Palestine, by the Zionist state. And so have been attacks on programming that talks about these issues. So encouraging you all to please donate towards the Matukaya Initiative. Of course, learn more about our work by signing up for our newsletter. Now, without further ado, I want to introduce our speaker for today. Thank you so much to Ellen Choy for joining us to share about her work. Her topic for today is radical solidarity through land rematriation and just transition. So excited to hear this talk by you, Ellen, and so pleased that you're able to join us to talk about your work through movement generation. Ellen's bio is she is a Chinese and Korean organizer, creative, and parent of two magical children. She's been a grassroots organizer and cultural worker in the Bay Area since 2007. Is deeply committed to environmental and climate justice movements locally and nationally. She's a collective co-director and co-lead of the land team at Movement Generation Justice and Ecology Project, building movements rooted in ecological justice and bringing ourselves back in right relationship to land and each other. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it now to you, Ellen. And again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you so much. Thank you, Anna, for all your support and work and building towards this, and everyone at the Amato Kaya Initiative. Thanks for folks who are joining and folks who are going to be watching the recording. My name is Ellen Choy. I use she and they pronouns. And yeah, I am a collective member at Movement Generation Justice and Ecology Project and a co-lead of our land team, amongst other roles that I hold inside of the collective. I'm gonna go ahead and just jump in, and I could use time checks. I didn't time myself doing this. So if you don't mind, like, feel free to interrupt me verbally. Just tell me maybe when I'm like halfway through or something. Cool, that would be great. And I just want to shout out, the work you do, Robin, and Amato, and the privilege and honor it was to know that young man, and then also the privilege and honor it is to know your family and the land in which you are stewarding, and having the honor of being able to stay at the Amatakaya house. And just I was just remembering we did our little baby moon there. And so technically both my kids have been there. It's just really magical. So I just the centering relationships for me. And that's so important. Just wanted to name that up front. Okay, I'm gonna get started with the presentation. I basically just put together a bunch of pictures to show um, and kind of tell the story. I think what I was invited into here, based on who the audience is, the target of this, and the title of this series, to talk about the work Movement Generation does generally, what our movement strategy work is, but also particularly talk about the land rematriation that we've been able to be a part of through this lens of solidarity. And so for me, that starts with my own story around solidarity and who I am as an Asian person on Turtle Island. So I'm going to start there, just kind of a um, like front loading, like where I'm going to be going, this journey I'm going to be taking you on. And I've never actually told this story and interwove it in this way. So you're on this journey with me. Yeah. And so I'm just going to start with who I am. This is baby Ellen. I come from a family of Chinese and Korean immigrants. Uh, my father's side is from the southern China, Toisan. I grew up very, very close to that side of the family, almost basically living with my grandparents, so a lot of Toisanese and Cantonese spoke in my house. And then my mother's side is from the very southern part of the Korean Peninsula. They come from a town called Cheonju, and they both met in LA. I am a product of LA. I grew up for the first 8 years of my life in a city called Hawthorne, and then we moved to Torrance. But this is who I am. And I've been up here in the Bay for over 20 years, so longer than I've been in anywhere in my life. The Bay is very much a home. And then here's now my current family, my everything. This is, honestly, like this is where I do a lot of my day-to-day liberation work. It's MG and then this family and these children. Guess when I was young and single and didn't have kids, I could be doing lots of other organizing outside the house, but this is where it is right now, and I'm proud of that. And then what is my other family in my day job, quote unquote, but it's also like at MG, we talk about it not as work-life balance, but work-life integration. So this real literally is part of my family, extended family, chosen family. Movement Generation Justice and Ecology Project was birthed around 2007. It's like there's a lot of like different beginnings to the timeline, depending on what story you tell. But it was a group of organizers who was really coming together at that time, really post Katrina, if you can give you a picture of like what was happening in social movements here in Turtle Island in the US. Post Katrina, and it was a group of organizers here in the Bay who doing all kinds of different sector work, labor, immigrant rights, youth work, environmental justice, coming together. Food justice, kind of. So they did like an analysis of the political economy of the Bay, and part of that was a set of conversations. And in that was sort of, climate change, environmental justice communities were and had been kind of orienting to what climate change is, but it was a big moment at that time for social movements to be like, wow, like no matter what sector you work on, this global ecological crisis is coming for our peoples, and it's going to come for our peoples first and worst here. And so trying to understand what that was. So fast forward, they created a bunch of like political education and movement strategy kind of modules, and built that into what is our core programming, which is a retreat. And we've been doing it ever since. And then our work has flourished and bloomed from there. And it's this idea of like, yeah, we need to get back into sacred and right relationship to each other and to place, to land as a way to and to like a deeper ecological lens and analysis as a way to meet this political moment on Earth. And you'll learn more about that later. And just to start my understanding and my journey of solidarity, I just got to start with, started with the who I was and my family. But I came up as a youth organizer in the Bay Area. I was organizing a lot of, mostly black and brown young people in Oakland and San Francisco. And it was amazing work. I love it. I miss it. That's how I got my chops as an organizer. And in all of that, it was like, wow, like I'm supporting and uplifting these young people to find the resources they need to understand who they are, where they come from, their histories, and how to organize their communities. What is my own story? It really pushed me in that way. And I got really deep into lots of different, both like doing the research and the work, like learning, like literally asking questions of my family at the table, but like also getting deep into like identity-based organizing for myself in the Bay to help me understand what that meant. How am I showing up for Black and Brown communities? Like, what is that deep connection? And that, for me, a lot of that is lived within a Korean anti-imperialist organization here in the Bay. It was an organization called HOBAK, Hello Organized Bay Area Koreans, not active anymore, but um, we did a lot of amazing work. And through that work, I was able to take solidarity trips back home to Korea. And this is a picture of me. Had the privilege and honor to take a trip to the DPRK, was also known as North Korea. And I show this picture and I talk about that place in terms of learning solidarity and also my identity, because like I learned through that journey how my family was and family's journey was so deeply impacted by war and colonization and imperialism. And my mom's peoples were land-based farmers, and I've had the privilege of visiting their farm in the South and seeing, even like going back with my mom after 30 years, she had never been back, and going back for the first time with her and seeing her reconnection to a place and to a land, and how emotional and like visceral that was, and feeling that disconnection that those of us who have been displaced by colonization and war and imperialism or slavery or all those violent systems we weren't just disconnected to any place. We were disconnected to land. We're disconnected to a relationship, to a home, to a people's, and to a place and an identity where people have been developing that identity and understanding that place for thousands and thousands of years, right? Since the beginning of time, like literally, and brought to a different place where we are then, settlers, and we are then guests. On land where people have also experienced that disconnection and that violence. So it's just really, for me, rooting in that understanding. And then going to North Korea was so impactful for many ways, without going into, that's like let's spend a whole day talking about that. But in this context, one of the most impactful moments for me was landing and looking around and being in these meetings and these, dancing with folks, just being like, wow, like this feels like home too. And why is there such a chasm between me and this people and this place that had been forced upon us, right? The 38th parallel created by a war that was not between the two Koreas, but actually between Korea and these imperialist forces. And the 30th parallel being forced upon us by the US military and other imperialist forces, separating families, so I've been removed from this place, like culturally, through information, through the ability to even like meet these folks, and yet they are my people too. And so that was super impactful. And then learning what it meant to show up for them through solidarity, and why, right? So this is part of why I do my work. And then bringing it back home, part of our work in Hobart was also to integrate ancestral cultural traditional practices of the drum, bringing that into the streets and fighting against imperialism and fascism here. Because every time you go, like I've been on different solidarity trips internationally, and it's like, what can we do? And they're like, go fight your shit back home, go do the work back there, because that's the belly of the beast, and we need you to do that. And so that's, a deep responsibility I hold here. And then, of course, I can't talk about my own journey around solidarity without mentioning Black Lives Matter, and this just launching us and me into a whole other sphere of holding the complexities of solidarity. And the only thing I'll say about this is, to me, I was showing up for solidarity, not just because I believed in the liberation. I believe in the liberation of Black people, right? For first and foremost, of course, and that I have deep solidarity, care, and love for Black people and Black community. It was also that I also understand that the interdependence of our liberation, that we are not free until Black people are free. We are not free until Indigenous sovereignty is real. We are not free until Palestine is free, right? So it's understanding both of those sides. As Asian people, we can be used as wedges against liberation for those people, or we can be the wedge that busts open the door for liberation for them. And that's what I'm trying to be. So just wanted to name that. And this is another moment just to bring it back to Indigenous sovereignty. It's connected to my story today and the land work that we're doing. But being in Standing Rock was also very life-changing, and seeing the relationship between us showing up in solidarity with Indigenous folks and the Indigenous sovereignty of them defending their land, but but being on a physical piece of land that they were like defending every day, building their vision for how they actually can take care of a place better, right? In the right way, returning to that, praying on that land and just also like putting our bodies on the line to defend that. Very impactful. All right, so I'm going to bring it back now to my work at MG. So through all of these acts of solidarity, I've really just deepened my relationship to myself, like first and foremost, to my comrades and the communities that I fight for and with, and also to those places that they were defending. So whether that was Korea or Oakland or Standing Rock, and just seeing that our liberations are intertwined with this deep relationship to the places that we're in, whether it's a country or it's acres of land or it's like a house, a home. And so at MG, it's part of what our work is to do is to like teach people that we're here and have kind of bring people along in this journey that we are in this defining moment on Earth, right? For our generation. But like, like this ecological crisis is very real. And I don't have to go down the laundry list of the how we're seeing it from the wildfires in California, right? Like the places that it's actually like materially coming to our homes. We are on the sixth mass extinction on Earth. Like y'all know the headlines. And why? Because we have grossly mismanaged, and we, like the universal humans, we have grossly mismanaged our home, right? And this ecology. And we often start our conversations with the etymology of the prefix eco, which means home. It comes from a Greek word that means home. And that, ecology often from growing up for me was like, oh, it's the plants and animals outside my window. But no, actually, ecology is if it's the knowledge of our home, that's actually where I live. That's not just the land, it's the people. And that reconnecting that deep understanding of ecology, of who we are and what we are and where we live, is the first step in building that deep reverence for that place that we are here to take care of. And that part of that is learning the history of that too, and how people have been disconnected from that relationship. And then you also see eco in the word economy, and economy meaning management of home. And so we have been force-fed this one way to manage home, this capitalist imperialist economy, right? But it is our directive now as folks who are fighting for liberation to challenge that economy and what builds the economies that we know uh, will actually take care of that home better. And and so how do we do that? How do we get there? And at MG, time and time again, amongst all of our grassroots organizing strategies, right? We have come to this place that what we need are strategies that are both visionary and oppositional. And not that, actually, if you think about this current political moment, a lot of us are scrambling to defend communities, to shut down ICE, defend the things that we need, and kind of in the survival mode. And I've been in spaces where people are like, when do we get to the offensive strategies? And the interesting thing is like to me is it's a false binary of like offensive and defensive, that actually everything that we should do, even if it's a quote unquote defensive strategy, needs to have an offensive like lens to it, right? Everything that we do should organize us better. Every time we shut down ICE, like how beautiful it was in the Bay for 2 days, folks showed up to make sure those folks can get to their appointments okay and get home safely. Like because the people showed up, they saved, like they were able to protect people and defend them from deportation. And so we need to do that. And in the acts of doing that, how are we also um, organizing ourselves better, doing that in ways that are like based in liberatory sacred relationships, and so like we're doing those things together and we're also focusing our work on visionary and strategies that build the economies that we want. Okay, so we want to do it all, and we can do it all, and we are doing it all. But we just need to for us, it's actually holding that balance, and we have fought and fought and fought against, going to places of power and demanding what we want, and not that we need to stop doing that work, but in some ways that is a muscle we've exercised very deeply. And so how are we actually building the visions that we want? And how much are we focusing our attention, our spirit, and our work and our time and our resources, right? Our funding and our capital in those places. And also time and time again, we've come back to this centralization of land. And and I've talked a little bit about it already, but like how are we reconnecting to the a reflective, responsive, sacred relationship to place? So not only are we making those connections for ourselves, but we are also uplifting and supporting the communities have been defending their right to do that. Um, because indigenous cultures and communities have been doing that since the beginning of the time. They have been building worldviews around the ways that they understand their home for thousands of years, which is much more intimately and sacredly intertwined into their economies, right? So how are we helping and supporting them defend those? And then how are we building our own sacred relationship to the places that we find ourselves by choice or by not? And that we feel like is our duty. And that land is key. Land is key to our productive livelihoods. It's key to our sacred relationships to all life, including us. And whether it's housing, food, access to culture, healing, spiritual spaces, like we can't do any of that without land. So we know that land is central. And I'm not, so the just transition framework is something that we've developed. So the history of the just transition framework is really just transition comes out as a concept, comes out of the labor and environmental justice movements and many years ago. And then some maybe 10, 8 to 10 years ago, we started to develop this in collaboration with other organizations and communities, most of them within the Climate Justice Alliance. But since then, it's been a lot of different organizing spaces and groups who have helped us shape this. But it is one take at a framework for how we need to get from this extractive economy, which we are now in, to fundamentally shifting the way in which we manage everything into regenerative economies. And like intentionally pluralizing that word is important because we actually, if we're really intimately tied to the places we live, we know that you can't actually have one type of economy managing every single place because every single place has different sets of relationships and different ways of being and different cultures and worldviews. So what the Zapatista says, building a world where many worlds fit, like that's also part of our work. And for people to take, how are we getting out of this extractive economy and building the thing that we actually want in this place and home that we actually want and know that will take care of not just us, but also the land better. And using that, it's like using this framework as a way to see also where we fit in. Like where do our strategies fit in? Where does my existing work fit in? And where also do I want to build new work and put my energy into? And that um and the how do we get from this to there? We've done our take and on a set of strategies. So I'm going to focus instead of, we have a whole module on this. You're seeing the kind of um, the visual diagram of a curriculum. So if anyone's interested, you could check that out either on MG's website or the Climate Justice Alliance's website. A lot more information about just transition. But for the sake of time, I wanted to share a little bit more about the strategic principles within the just transition framework um, to show the kind of our take on how we get there. And so we see it as four different strategic principles. What we feed grows. And I'm going to go into each of these with an example. If it is the right thing to do, we have every right to do it. If we're not prepared to govern, we're not prepared to win. And if it's not so soulful, it's not strategic. And so here's some examples. This is a little preview. I'll share a little bit more about our land project later, but we've talked about this in the context of like strategies that are visionary and oppositional. Um, but we just believe that what we feed grows. If we're going to spend all of our time, just defending and fighting within a system that doesn't work for us, that's not actually investing and growing the system that we actually want. So this is a strategy about how do we actually take our oppositional struggles and our campaign work now, and how do we build it into visionary strategies? And we've seen, I think that's, yeah, there's a lot of beautiful examples of it. This was, so it's just like, I can't, we can spend lots of time like shouting out so many different beautiful examples of work people are doing to defend land, to build community spaces, to put liberatory policies in place. And one of our takes is this land work, which I'll talk about later, and land rematriation. Oops. If it is the right thing to do, we have every right to do it. So um, this is also speaking to that just that pairing of visionary and oppositional. So there is, for us, it's also not about just building cooperative economics, building a worker co-op, building a farm, um, building a land-based project without an analysis and a compass around power dynamics and the transfer of power. So everything we need to do needs to challenge power, right? And the transfer of power back to the people and back to the scales of governance that where we can control, where we are making decisions about our daily lives. And so this is an example. So that's the, if it's the right thing to do, we have every right to do it, whether there's a legal barrier to that, right? Whatever quote unquote is legal to the work we do. We know that we many times will have to break rules to do what's right and to make our strategies real and our liberation real. So I was blessed to be a part of Movement Generation, part of a project called the Land and Liberation Initiative many years ago now, which is so wild. Time is wild. It has taken on a beautiful life of its own. It's still, BLLI is still a project out in the world held by the Center for Third World Organizing. And it was launched in collaboration, MG and the Blackout Collective here in the Bay Area. And and this is just one manifestation of that project, was a Juneteenth day of action where Black folks were taking 40 acres across 40 cities in one day through various measures and various direct action. Direct action was a very central part of the principles and practices of this project. So it was a way, and it was a very Black-centered and Black-led space. And there was three of us from MG who are non-Black folks who were able to be part of the core committee and support it in different ways. And so I say this as an example of the strategy, but also a way in which I've been able to exercise my own solidarity, and my role as an Asian person in this project was really important, and an important kind of praxis for me to like practice what it meant to be in those spaces and why. But yeah. And then if we're not prepared to govern, we're not prepared to win. This doesn't just mean like we have to be ready to be put into elected offices, which is true. But we have to be ready to govern every space that we're in, from our homes to our workplaces, to our local governments, and beyond. And I just want to shout Richmond, one, because it's now I live in El Sobrante, now it's part of my home, my local home, but it's also work I've been able to do. Actually, Richmond and the organizing in Richmond against the Chevron refinery is part of like like the very, very beginnings of my organizing life. And so it has a very deep part in my heart. But Richmond, man, if you think about the way in which these organizations, shout out Cooperation Richmond, shout out APEN, CBE, Center for Better Communities for Better Environment, Urban Tilth, all these amazing organizations that have been organizing there for many years, have been building different ways in which democratic, cooperative governance, self-governance is very apparent, and because of that, have been able to win. And I'll say quickly, so Cooperation Richmond supports the building of cooperative economies in Richmond, from worker cooperatives to other just spaces where the workplaces are cooperatively governed. And Urban Tilth is building a food justice movement, have built a food justice movement here in Richmond through the lens of food sovereignty. And the Climate Justice Alliance really deep has a lot of deep organizing. And groups like APIN and CB have come together through many years of organizing, and also with the groups like the Richmond Progressive Alliance, where they've been able to also deeply influence local government. So they're not just, doing these projects within their organizations, but they're organizing together to actually build power, and take seats at the table. And because of that, have been able to do things like they were fighting for a polluter's pay tax inside, and Richmond is a company town. And we're able to win millions of dollars from Chevron in a settlement, because Chevron was fighting that ballot measure. And so it's complex. And um, that was a showing of their community power. Like, if it wasn't for the organizing, the many years of organizing, and their ability to practice governance and be ready for that moment, they wouldn't have been able to get that win for their community. There's more to say. You can check out the organizations, but I want to shout them out in this context. And then lastly, if it's not soulful, it's not strategic. So this is about making sure that our strategies are steeped in who we are as peoples, our ancestry, our cultures, our joy. And this is I've been able to be a part of the advisory board for a group called APAL in Oakland, who works with Asian youth. I'll just tell a quick story. This was the site of in Chinatown, Oakland, Chinatown, which has being gentrified. They were going to build one of the worst hotel chains. They actually did build it on this land, and the youth every year have their own cultural performance, and um, and it's a really important moment for them. It's actually an organizing event where the parents come. Anyways, they also were really worried about the future of Chinatown. And so what they decided to do was to do their cultural practices for that upcoming show to actually break in, quote unquote, go through the fence and do their practice on this land as a way for them to embody, like, reclaiming this land, reclaiming this space for themselves, which Chinatown has been so important to them, for many years. So, and it was just beautiful to see them, and then the solidarity across different Asian communities that you see, and everyone holding space for each other, and it was just really beautiful. So I love that. And then yeah, where am I at on time? I don't know if are you in the chat for me? Haven't been seeing it.
Yeah, Ellen. So we have about 15 minutes more
Okay.
for this part. So yeah.
Okay, no,
Um,
I'm gonna be really quick then. I'll just tell the story of the land and then.
yeah.
So yeah, okay, cool. Thanks. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention to chat. Um, so that brings me back to our land project at MG. This is just one of the ways in which we see the practice of our movement strategy and our land framework being take it back, make it better, and protect it forever. And this is, we were able to access 43 acres of land in the East Bay Hills. It was held by one family for about 100 years through the Violent Homestead Act. It was one of the last remaining land in the East Bay held under that act, and the family was selling. Um, we were able to raise the funds and through a really beautiful process, rematriate this land to the Segorite Land Trust, which is an Indigenous women-led land trust here in the Bay. And then we have a 35 or 34 and a half, almost 35-year agreement with them to be the main stewards of it. And we're going to be building the Justice and Ecology Center, what we're calling that for now, here on the land. And the idea is that it will be a movement retreat center, but also an ecological demonstration site and a mutual aid resilience hub. And yeah, every rematriation is different. I think we're learning, and for us, it's about not just about bringing land back into indigenous, hands and stewardship, but it's about bringing land back into a system of governance that is not led by white colonial frameworks, right? And so it's not just the who, but it's the how. And so our intimate relationship with Segorte is very important. And because we are guests on the land and our agreements are very important, so that relationship is at the center. And yeah, we're really excited about it. We're only 2 years in, so we're still building it. We're still learning what it means to take care of the land and the buildings that are on the site. And we're just now in this moment where we're pivoting from just kind of learning and observing on the land to starting to design and start implementing some building. We're working on our first fully accessible bathroom and studio so that we can have accessible spaces for folks with mobility disabilities. Um, and also just deepen like dreaming and visioning and designing. Yeah. Oh, yeah, we don't have to watch that. Okay, so I'll stop there. Thank you, and I'm sorry about time.
No, no worries. Ellen, hopefully we'll be able to talk more in kind of our podcast, which we will also put out into the world at some point, in addition to this webinar. But it looks like we do have a question in the chat, and it's this framework is both useful. I'm guessing the just transition framework is both useful and beautiful. I was wondering if you have thoughts about how technological growth fits into the just transition framework. For example, can we balance the everyday ways in which technology can empower individuals and communities to do more and connect against the deeply extractive and capitalist interests that control much of technological growth? Great question. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the first starting point is that technology is a tool, not a solution, like point blank, right? And so, um, and you know that it's complex, and we say that transition is the process of navigating complexity and contradictions. So. I'm both not like an analog girl, like a Luddite, but I'm also not like, I'm not the tech fetish person. Like for me, I found myself in a swimming through contradictions every day. So for me, it's about asking questions about each technology tool that we're talking about, right? And one of those key ones is who controls that technology and for what purpose? And and what are the boundaries of consent and yeah, around all of that, like boundaries of consent, exploitation, and extraction for that tool, right? So um, while I can, like, technology has saved lives, and I think that's important, and I'm not anti that. I think we need to understand, like, who controls that technology, who benefits from that technology, and if it is corporations from Silicon Valley, I'm not with it, right? If that technology is extracting more resources, um, in the process, then I'm actually not with it. Like, what is the actual regenerative models of these technologies? So that's from solar to AI to medical technology, like all of it. I think we just need to figure out the liberatory ways to use it. And I think there are people who are getting more and more versed in that. Um, and that's such a big one for our generation to ask ourselves. So yeah, I'm glad you're asking it.
Thank you so much, Ellen. I love your answer. I really feel like it's really, really helpful because yeah, even starting with the idea that technology is a tool, not a solution. But typically, there has been a way that people have framed, um, you know, or have offered up primarily technological solutions to the climate crisis when maybe there's something much deeper. It's about a kind of economics and governance problem, right, as opposed to tech one, or not asking the ways in which tech exacerbates the crisis. So thank you for that answer. So great. Anna has a question about she's asked or stated how you've discussed your family in the beginning and a bit of youth intergenerational organizing when you were at APAL, but what's something that your own children have taught you? Maybe what you've learned as a mother as you continue to organize.
Oh, what a beautiful question. Thanks, Anna. Um, oh man, they teach me things every day. Um, Man, I don't know. Let's see. I haven't really been asked this question, maybe not recently. Um, and my kids are at two very different ages, like, kind of like I have a 7-year-old and I have a toddler. Um, I think both of them teach me to be present, like the importance of being present in the work that I do. Um, and also uh continuously like the ability to embrace complexity. That also comes to mind. So like, okay, so like the importance of being present is just like how to be in the world to me. It's like that's important that they teach me every day. I think all kids will teach you that, like, because no matter what's going on, like they need you. They need you in that moment. You gotta drop everything and like be with them, right? And so I think they taught me that on a whole nother level. But the ability to like embrace complexity, I think, like I have one of my children is very gender expansive. And so I'm learning every day how to have these conversations about gender and even the world, right? Just with them in these ways that um like it's just interesting with a 7-year-old who hasn't been conditioned into oppressive gender dynamics and frameworks as we have for many, many years. I have to catch myself in almost every ways that I'm like saying something and it's like, oh, but I need to also just embrace this complexity. Like they are living in a world that's going to shape them in one way, and I'm trying to raise them in this other way, and that's never going to be this perfect solution probably ever. And I have to also like a lot of letting go. But yeah, that ability to like embrace complexity and be in it with them. Not sure if that really made sense. It does in my heart.
It does, although I think you kind of shared it as well early on. I guess partly it has to do with the framing of and not this idea of work-life balance, but this work-life integration that you talked about, that MG think, how MG kind of approaches work and life. And I think also as you kind of talked about how your organizing is not just kind of outside of the home, right? Connected to this work-life
Mhm.
integration, that the home is a site for organizing.
Mhm.
It is the site where we manifest visions of something different outside. I think it is a microcosm, right, of what the just
Mhm.
transition looks like when we think very carefully and with great intention around how we organize our household. So, yeah, thank you. I feel like there's so much that's so generative. Speaking of generative, yeah, but
Mhm.
about the framework itself, the just transitioner framework, and how y'all collectively organize as an organization, and the ways that you're thinking about your work and your lives. So thank you. I don't know if there's any other questions or comments, or maybe in these last few moments, Ellen, if you feel like there were other things that maybe you want to speak to a little bit more. I know that rematriation, um, is so important to the work of MG, and I guess maybe in the time that we have to talk a little bit more about what that really looks like. How do we all think about rematriation? Even, if we're kind of by extension, right? If maybe how our families, our households become sites for where we can manifest a just transition framework. What would it look like then for us within the context of our families or households to engage in, that work of rematriation?
Mm. That's an interesting way to see it. Yeah. So Segorite, I feel like is been really like in terms of defining what rematriation is, it's like that's the place that the people that I've really learned from and continuing to learn from. I think because we hear about land back um, and that kind of work, but rematriation as a framework, I think is very unique to what they're doing, and I think they're shaping it too, like in real time. But I do, to me, we just had this conversation with them. We all kind of answered like, what does it mean to you? But yeah, it is that part of just not the literal transaction of the land back into an indigenous land trust or indigenous governance or stewardship, but is committing to a liberatory process and governance structure of how to steward land. Um, right, because we're trying to shatter like these white colonial and patriarchal ways of governing and exploiting land and people. So it is a commitment to doing that differently. And so that to me is something that can get re get translated to a home or a organization or a workplace or a family or like I'm just thinking about I live in this HOA and I'm just like how do I govern with my neighbors here shit right like govern self-governance at every corner and how do I bring in a better model than like what it is now? It's like a bunch of old grumpy white men who yell at each other at HOA meetings. I'm like, so or like our schools, just so bringing it into every places where we actually in our daily lives where there is a governance system, um, and trying to like remix that stuff in a way that is like liberatory and takes care of, is inclusive of people. It challenges inequities. It puts women, gender expansive folks, trans people at the forefront. It identifies race and class like there's ways we know that if we hold our politics and principles in these places of governance, we know that those places and people are going to get taken a lot care of a lot better. So that's what it means, I think, to me.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I mean, I wonder, and we don't have a whole lot of time, but I do wonder if is the invitation around rematriation for those of us who hold title for homes,
Mm,
is the
mhm, mhm,
challenge for
mhm.
every single one of us to really think about beyond our lifetimes, right? When we think about inheritance or kind of again ownership and title, is it that we really ought to start to create those frameworks for a transfer,
Yeah.
and how much is that
Mhm.
part of the work? Say, do you feel like maybe MG is that part of the work to organize people to ask these questions, if not to help provide them
Mm.
frameworks for that transfer?
Yeah, thank you for bringing it back there. Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, it's like understanding whose land you're on, like at a basic level. And like getting in a practice of doing not just where you live, but like I'm in a practice of doing that when I go anywhere, when I travel somewhere, when I go camping, I'm always like, let me just see whose land I'm going to, whose land I'm going to be on. And even if it's not directly asking for permission, just like, in the universe being like, I'm a guest, I'm coming here with humility, and so like that relationship too, it's a cognitive thing almost. It's just like shifting your whole framework of how you enter space and land and understanding that colonial relationship. So I think that's first and foremost. And then absolutely, yes, if that can then translate into, yeah, well, like that's like the I don't know, next level for me in this HOA is like, can we start paying a Shumi land tax? Can we actually think about how do we honor that we all together here own property on this land? Like, yeah, what an extractive framework and how do we flip that? Yeah, and shout out to like real estate agent, like there's like radical real estate agents who are looking at it from that standpoint, people who are really working at the nexus, and this is part of our work of Black liberation and Indigenous sovereignty, like stolen labor on stolen land and intertwined liberations and how are folks holding that on both sides. And like, so there's some really beautiful also complexities and nuances in there that we're trying to hold in our organizing.
I love that. Thank you so much, Ellen. Thank you for all the work you do, for taking the time to present about your work and your story. And thanks for folks who are able to join us here, and looking forward for this conversation to continue on as we share the recording and eventually share out a podcast that extends the conversation. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and close out the Zoom room. Thanks so much, everyone. And I'll see you on the other side, Ellen.
Thank you so
Take care.
much.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much.